Blaring Out Show.
Hey, what's up world? My name is Nikki Misery and I'm the guitar player of the rock band New Year's Day.
How did your musical journey begin, Nikki?
My journey into the music world began at a very young age. Again, at that time, my mom wanted to get me into more of an entertainment industry because I had this very lively, explosive personality even when I was younger. About like 12 or 13, I was just starting to get into like punk rock in the scene. I had these CDs that were like $5 at a time, Punkorama 1, Punkorama 2, out by Epitaph. And they had this song on there by this band TSOL, Code Blue, which blew my mind at the time. So we went to this modeling agency to get headshots done, and that's where I met Blair from the Blaring Out Show. He was doing my makeup, and we somehow got on the topic of music. And I remember I mentioned TSOL. He's like, oh, I know those guys. And he showed me how to play Code Blue. I remember that at that time, it was on my little 4-string bass. And that's when I realized, like, you can make those sounds on these instruments. Like, it can be done. So I started just playing in random punk rock bands around Orange County. And then one day I started to get really serious about music and what I wanted to do. I packed up all my stuff, moved up to LA, and went to Musicians Institute out in Hollywood. Shortly after graduating, I met Mixie Demner, and we started the band Stitched Up Heart, which is now on Century Media Records. I did one tour with them. That's how I got in contact with New Year's Day. What New Year's Day was doing at that time was absolutely my interest. It had this horror, dark theme to it. It was very theatrical. The energy, the music was still in your face and rock, but it still had that pop where you could shake your hips. And from then on out, it's been a nonstop tour and rock and roll ride.
How did you meet Ash Costello?
So an amazing story is actually how I first met Ash Costello. And I was playing in the band Stitched Up Heart at the time. And I remember I was working 2 jobs. And the last thing I wanted to do after working the second job was go out. But I was dragged to this event to go network because Century Media was having a party at this club in LA called Bar Sinister. And in protest, I did not want to go, so I kind of dressed like this 70s prom nerd meets Pee Wee Herman meets goth. So I had these tight pants, this pinstripe 70s-ish jacket with this ruffled white shirt and this big red bow tie. I combed my hair really flat and to the side, you know, to get as nerdy looking as possible, with these thick giant glasses with like the lens popped out. And of course, makeup done. And so I was at this event, you know, mingling, making friends and stuff. And all of a sudden I looked into this crowd and this girl comes out dressed in all white and she just points at me. It's like, you look like somebody I need to know. And it was funny, we were talking. It turned out to be Ash Costello from New Year's Day. And that's how she introduced me. At the time, I never heard of the band. So I was like, oh, that's cool. You know, that's awesome. And she was asking me about my clothes, in which I told her, you know, like I was dragged here, I didn't want to come. So I tried to dress as non-goth and rebellion as possible. And she's like, oh my God, the same way. That's why I dressed in all white.
What was your first impression when you met Ash Costello?
My first impression was this was one of the most punk rock people I've ever seen. To have this kind of just all white in this goth club. Because LA is still very pretentious, as open, as cool as it is. It's more so elite-y and cool.
How was the Nikki Misery makeup born?
And it's actually an interesting story because in my mid-20s, I was working this dead-end job, wasn't going anywhere, wasn't doing anything musically or interesting with my life. Days were passing by like seconds, months were passing by like minutes, and years just falling down the wind. And I remember being at my friend's house, just kind of like in this really dark, depressed state. And I was in the bathroom just staring at the mirror. And after like a couple minutes of looking in, I started to see like this physical embodiment of this anger, this rebellion, this energy, this life in me that wanted to get out. And I remember seeing it with like this pale face, smeared makeup, but it was more like melting images in a sense. And I remember it grabbed me and it was like, you're meant for something more. This is not the way. This is not your path. And as it pulled me in, as I came to, it was almost like the 2 entities were combined. And we were like one person. And I knew from then on, like, I wanted to be that voice of tomorrow.
How did New Year's Day outlast the dissolution of your romantic relationship with Ash Costello during the Malevolence tour?
So a lot of people don't know that in the New Year's Day history, Ash and I were dating when I first joined. About a year into it, after the Epidemic EP Into the Malevolence, we ended our romantic relationship. But stuff like that will always carry a strain in the band, especially for the first bits. You always have this kind of resentment against each other, whether you want it or not, as much as you're trying to be mature. and there's always some backlash. But New Year's Day definitely survives, because especially at that time with Malevolence, we were getting beat down by everybody. Label, management, just other bands. Like, nobody wanted to take out a makeup band. We had a female singer. There was only so much you could do with that. And we were getting beaten down by every path that we were trying to move forward. And eventually, towards the end of our first headliner, which was the Other Side tour, we started to realize that the only people that had our backs was each other. And our friendship and our band and the drive that we had for our art and the passion and things we wanted to say far outweighed this petty little anger that we had. And it was a very big learning experience, and it made us stronger, not only as friends, but as a band, and in the songwriting and the things that we've been able to tackle after. So in a sense, like, if it felt like it hurt the band, but at the same time, it really made the band stronger. And especially coming into now with the album Unbreakable, this band has never felt more unbreakable.
The highlights of performing at past Warped Tours with New Year's Day.
There have been amazing highlights of playing like these past Warped Tours. I remember the first one I ever played was a Warped Tour 2013. We were playing Seattle. We were on like one of the smaller stages. And it was our first day. It was just about before doors opened. Kevin Lyman called us and said, "Hey, we're going to have you guys open up the main stage." And I remember Ash telling me, I'm like, my first time playing Warped Tour, and I get to play main stage. And it was so cool. That's when I first met the Black Veil guys, and who were super awesome. They were like hanging out side stage with us. It was the first time I met Sean Kama, who used to sing in this Orange County punk band Damnation, who I used to love too at the time. So it was really cool. You get to see like people who helped inspire you and just play this giant in front of a sea of people. That was pretty magical. And the last Warped Tour we played, I remember one of the first days we were walking to stage. We were actually a headlining band, so we were on the main stage, every day now. I was walking by, we're all ready in our garb. We're walking to the stage, and I look back and I see this gentleman sitting on the ground. I was like, oh my, it's Tony, the singer of the Adolescents. And nobody was around him. And me growing up in the punk rock scene, like, I know who this guy is. And I was so excited. Like, I ran up to him, and I shook his hand. I said, "Hey, I just want to introduce myself. So my name's Nikki. I play with New Year's Day. I just want to let you know I'm a huge fan of your band. Like, grew up listening to you guys. I'm very excited to share this tour with you guys." And he was so nice, and just like, "Oh, yeah, cool." So we made friends with him. And I remember one time on stage, I remember just doing this back bend on one of the songs, and I was bending backwards. I see Tony right there with this big smile. And I almost fell over just being so excited. I was like, is this what kids feel like when they go meet like Andy Black or something? Like, I was so stoked and like kind of starstruck at the same time. And it was so cool to see somebody who inspired me musically to just be on stage, watching me, hanging out, saying great show. That's one of my most favorite moments, not just Warped Tour, but just in touring life in general.
Did you ever make friends with Andy Bierzak from the Black Veil Brides?
On 2011 Warped Tour, we chatted a couple times. He was always super nice. He actually came up to me one time. We were at like a Six Flags, and he was like, "Hey, Nikki, how'd you get in the band?" And he just started talking to me. And to be honest, I had no idea he knew who I was. So that was cool. So usually my experiences with him were pleasant. He's always been a nice person to me.
He's very professional. Yeah. One of the most professional rock stars I've ever met in my life.
And to be honest, too, I remember when Black Veil first came out, I was so jealous of that look. I was like, that looks so cool. So they always had cool style. And like all the guys in the band that I've met have all been super sweet to us. So I got nothing but respect for them and everything they've done. I'm glad to see them back.
Touring as opening act for Marilyn Manson in 2015.
So about 2015, we got an offer to open up for Marilyn Manson in Europe, this was going to be like our biggest tour ever, and Marilyn Manson also was a huge inspiration in my teenage years. Just that rebellion, that full on just middle finger to society, what of course we think is right, beautiful. Like, I took so many inspirations from that. And so now here we are on tour with them. And I remember first walking in, they had the big podium that he does for his songs. You almost like walking through this museum. And getting into it, it was a very strange, tense, interesting tour. Because it was one of these shows, and he's one of these artists that like you want to watch every day because you have no idea what's going to happen. You don't know if they're going to play the same songs every day, if he's going to run off stage. And every show he would start cracking bottles and cutting himself on stage. And you're like, wow, this is like some of the same stories you hear about when you hear about like Iggy Pop playing and stuff like that. And like, I'm watching this now. And all of a sudden you would go on stage and there would be this tent where nobody else went in, but I'm sure a lot of interesting things happened in there. It was after one of the shows we played, their tour manager came in and talked to Ash. Would be like, Ash, Mr. Manson would like to meet you now. So Ash went into the dressing room to go meet Marilyn Manson, where he's blaring Justin Timberlake. And I'm like, wow, he's kind of on our level. We always have these pop dance parties, but it's very interesting to see Marilyn Manson playing Justin Timberlake. Her and him had this little dance party karaoke session on this little pink microphone. And I remember she saw the set list. She's like, is that the set list you're playing? I guess he thought she asked do you want the set list? He's like, oh yeah, you can have it. And Ash, being as polite as she is, like, oh no, I wasn't asking for it. He just rips up, throws it away. It's like, fine. It's a very fun, interesting experience from what I heard.
How have you not become a casualty of sex, drugs, and rock and roll?
How I've not become a casualty of the usual sex, drugs, and rock and roll is usually, I do want to start too with like my family's upbringing. I've always been just a good head on my shoulders, like knowing what I believe to be morally right, as in just being good to other people. And especially with this band, which I really love about this band, and Ash especially, we've always been very outspoken about doing the right thing for people. We've never been one of these people who wanted to just get messed up and just hook up with girls. That wasn't our thing. We had a message. We had something we wanted to say. At the same time, this is a career. This is a job we want to do. And with so many people, young artists falling to the same rock and roll, I don't even want to call it lifestyle, but a parody of what we're meant to believe is the lifestyle. I think it's more punk rock and more rebellious to be like, I'm not falling down that line. I don't have to be this casualty, another number in the 27 Club.
What was your reaction the first time you heard yourself on the radio with New Year's Day, and that would be the song Shut Up?
So it's very insane. I remember the first time that we heard ourselves on the radio. My mom was actually dropping me off at LAX International Airport. We're about to start one of our international tours that we're about to do. So we're on the way, and I'm like, Mom, why don't we just listen to some Octane? Let's see if they play us. And so we're like, okay. So we turned on SXM Octane. And Jose Mangan was doing his, it was his hour, his show on that night. And I remember we're starting to get off the exit, kind of pull up towards LAX, and Jose Mangan is talking. He's like, yeah, he's one of my really good friends. And we're like, wait, he's talking about Ash. He's like, I was just recently in their music video. And of course, if you don't know, Jose Mangan was in our video for Shut Up. And then he started talking about Ash Costello, and this is New Year's Day with Shut Up. And I remember me and my mom going, oh, it's on, and we had like this total like that thing you do moment where we turned it up, put all the windows down, driving up to LAX, and we see some of like the rest of the band who already got dropped off waiting. We're like, guys, listen, and Shut Up's playing, we're blaring it, and we're having this little dance party on the thing. It was the coolest, most surreal experience. And every time we've heard ourselves on the radio, we've always had it filmed, and I still have that on my camera with Jose talking. So again, Jose, thank you so much.
Who did you bond with the most on the New Year's Day 2018 tour with Halestorm and In This Moment?
So touring with Halestorm and In This Moment, it is a collection of amazing, very interesting, eclectic, humble characters. And as much as I want to say, I think I very much got along with RJ from Halestorm. Me and him, we just have this bouncy, insane, crazy, childlike attitude of wonder. And it's funny, every time I see him, like, it's my two favorite letters, R and J. And he'd be like, Nikki, I miss the misery. And honestly, one of my favorite people. But everybody on those camps are awesome. Like hanging out with Randy from In This Moment. We're big Kiss fans, of course. We always got to talk about that stuff. Joe Storm was actually one of the nicest, coolest people. Lizzie is an absolute sweetheart. Like the bands and their crew, especially the Hailstorm crew, we really got along with, and the In This Moment. It's become like this big giant family. It's almost like coming back from spring break and seeing all your best friends again.
How was the New Year's Day album Unbreakable a rebirth for the band?
So the New Year's Day album Unbreakable was definitely a rebirth in the band. And especially with what the band was going through with the times of recording Epidemic and especially Malevolence, morale in the band, professionally and personally, like in our own lives, was at like a very all-time low. You know, we were fighting just to get any kind of attention or tours. Although the crowds loved us, it just seems to be nobody else wanted to give us the time of day. Everything was a struggle. Everything was a fight. Nobody got along, and it got to the point where, like, being in the band, you almost woke up and would be like, I think this might be the last day of this band, and you didn't know. But we persevered, we stayed strong, we've held on to those obstacles. And you can even tell with the imagery of the band, because the band had a lot of this dead look, and that's how we felt at that time. And en route to Unbreakable, so many doors opened up for us. So many amazing things happened to us in the band that we started to have this spark of life. It was like a resurrection for us. And now when you see the band, you see this color in our skin. You know, you see us almost smiling on stage because it's like, this is happening for us. Like, we've worked this hard. It's not a sense that we deserve it. We're going to work our butts off and take it, because that's, especially in this cutthroat industry where it's hard to trust people and hard to have friends. The fact that we're still here, we're still going strong, and there's no end in sight for us. We've never felt more unbreakable.
First time seeing yourself in Alternative Press magazine.
AP magazine has been, you know, a staple in the alternative music scene, alternative press. And the first time I got to see myself in the band in there was very surreal. Like, I even still have 2 or 3 of the magazines. I went go buy it. I would go to Barnes and Nobles, and I would just leave a bunch of magazines open with that picture right there in any Barnes and Nobles I went to. But a very insane thing is, it's like this is like the pictures I used to see of the people I looked up to that inspired me, and then here I am doing the same thing. And I always have this weird, scared thought that as all this insane magical stuff is going on, that one day I'm going to go to sleep and I'm going to wake up with my mom like hitting me saying, it's time for school, and my whole life was a dream, and I'm going to be 15 again, going to stupid high school and not touring the world.
Tell me the story of how you had to stop playing Malevolence live because you kept breaking your guitar, and Schecter Guitars said, you're not Paul Stanley. Stop breaking those guitars.
So in case you guys never seen me play before, I have a very explosive energy. It's almost violent and nihilistic. But I have this thing where we used to play the song Malevolence. And during the bridge, it would be this long silence. Not silence, but it would just be Ash just by herself. And the rest of the band would kind of have this prayer pose. Because in this sense, Malevolence was about this very dark thing about us. And we wanted to actually portray this part of us, like begging for forgiveness, salvation. And as the song kicks back in, we would have this explosive energy come out. And during that time, I couldn't help it, but I would actually take my guitar off and throw it on the ground and stomp on it. And every other show, I would start breaking these guitars, and I couldn't stop doing it, so we had to stop playing that song. I got to the point where when I would bring my guitars to Schecter for repairs, they have to tell me, can you stop breaking our guitars? You're not Paul Stanley. But so I've tried to tone it down a bit, but it's really hard because that's my energy. When you feel the music, you got a place to go. It's a little Rancid reference for you.
Yeah. What was the best part of making the Come For Me video?
So last year we worked and released on our latest single, the music video for our latest single, Come For Me. And the idea of the video was very inspired by Dusk Till Dawn's Vampire Strip Club Bar. And to be honest, that was honestly the most fun I've ever had making a music video. Like, it wasn't so serious about having to do this crazy performance. We got to have a lot of fun with it, put our natural personality into some of these characters. And the band itself, we played the mariachi band that later turned into vampires. And it was a lot of fun. It was very free, open, and not taking itself too seriously, with at the same time showing like a bit of rock and roll attitude. But the set was amazing. It was like we pretty much had no funding for it, as we usually do with a lot of our videos, but we made magic out of dirt, and I couldn't be more proud of us. And I know I always talk about Ash in this, but like, she's honestly one of the most hard-working people. If you give her dust, she'll turn it into gold. And like, even now we sit back and be like, how did this come about? You know, and it'll always be like 2 or 3 o'clock in the night, AM, you know, the morning before the shoot, and I'm getting a call from Ash like, yeah, I'm still out running errands. I'm almost done with this. I'll see you guys in like 2 hours. We're like, oh my gosh, she's still going.
The best part of making the Shut Up video. Some
of the best parts about making our video for Shut Up, which was the first single that we released off this album, was also another parody of a 90s horror movie based off of Christian Bale's American Psycho. And we tried to incorporate a lot of like the video images or like the movie images into the video and kind of give it our own little twist. And it was so cool because we had Jose Mangan from SXM Octane guest star in it, and he let us use the Affliction studio where he does his show from SXM in. So we got to use like the office spaces in there, drink out of his sweet Modelo refrigerator, and like, he was so kind to us, so gracious, so allowing us to just be our usual mess in the studio. But it was so much fun. We got to be covered in blood, play rock and roll, and reenact some of our favorite movies. That sounds like 3 of my favorite things.
Highlights of the album periods of, and we're going to start off with 2013's Victim to Villain.
Ooh, okay. I was getting in my head for Unbreakable, but Victim to Villain, awesome. So some of the highlights of working with the band and being in the studio in the era of Victim to Villain. Some of my favorite highlights was, this is actually when we first started to get really serious with working with other producers, and we were working with Eric Ron, who completely got our sound and was able to pull really cool stuff out of us and take Ashley's visions and the sound she had and put it, you know, and put it out there sonically. And this was the first time we really started to mess with different tunings and having 7-string guitars. And Victim to Villain was really New Year's Day starting to take its first real steps into a professionalism, really completing and dialing and polishing this look, this sound that we had, getting heavier and heavier into Ashley's visions. So there's so many cool moments.
And 2014's Epidemic EP, We're So Contagious, We Can't Contain It. Tell me how you feel it's ironic that you did an EP called Epidemic.
So in 2014, we released the EP Epidemic, which is kind of crazy because when you think of our times today, especially the song Epidemic is actually coming back in such a big way in today's events. It's really interesting to see how many kids are relating to this song, and also all these new people who are discovering the song and starting to feel really, because like a lot of it in the chorus is saying, we're so contagious, you know, we're so contagious we can't contain it, and here we are, you know, and it's becoming a little bit more literal and starting to feel like maybe we're the virus itself.
What was the highlight of that time for you in 2014?
The highlight of doing the Epidemic EP in 2014 was we're actually starting to get heavier. A little bit step away from the poppier, cuter side of New Year's Day. We're kind of getting like uglier, dirtier, mixing with more sounds. There's a time where like now, like New Year's Day and Schecter, we're hand in hand, and so we had access to these, you know, really working 7-string guitars now. Now everything is 7-string. We're getting lower, grittier, sludgier, and it was still like this evolution and transitioning phase of New Year's Day, and it was really amazing just to see us like coming together, working together. And by this time, we were starting to get this new lineup. We had Jeremy Valentine and Tyler Burgess, who's now in Falling in Reverse, and Nick Rossi, who now plays it in Three Teeth. And just to find these influences, these other attitudes from these people, and to see this mix I couldn't be more proud of that.
2015's Malevolence.
2015, we released Malevolence, and this was one of my favorite highlights of this time and era. New Year's Day, at that time, even though as dark as the time it was for us, we were on fire at that time. The energy was insane. The chemistry in the band has finally clicked where we're all on the same page. We're all 100% behind each other. We had each other's backs. We were a gang. And since we kind of wanted to be the new Motley Crue of this time, this walking middle finger to society. And by this time we were full on in our rebellion that we wanted to be the ugly. Ash can embody the pretty, and we were her monsters. And everything that we've learned before, we perfected, from the choreography, for the things we wanted to say. We were an explosion, and by Malevolence, the world was seeing it.
2018's Diary of a Creep covers EP.
In 2018, we released an EP called Diary of a Creep, which had a lot of cover songs and had one original song on it. And pretty much the reason why we put that out is before, we only had a month to write an album, and it'd be in between tours, and there was no leeway on that. So as proud of the other works as we are, it was still very rushed. We never got to really obsess with the music that we created. And again, not to dismiss it, because I love and I'm so proud of that music. On the road to Unbreakable, our team at the time was like, take all the time you need. So just to have something out there, we put out an album of some of our favorite songs, songs that we grew up with, and songs of just things that were happening around the time, especially with Linkin Park, Chester Bennington's passing. We wanted to, pay tribute. And we just recently had a tour with Hell Yeah, which had Pantera's Vinnie Paul. And of course, we're giant Pantera fans, so we had the cover of Hostile on there. And a fun fact, before Vinnie Paul passed, he got to hear it and came up to us and gave his approval and was like, good job, guys, which was absolutely amazing. And so we put that out just to have some kind of music. We put out Disgust Me, and we put out a music video for Disgust Me. That way we can still keep having our art out there and to give us more time to work on the road to Unbreakable.
2019's Unbreakable, your highlight.
2019's highlight of Unbreakable. This is our first big major, not like major label release, but like into the radio. We're starting to get kicked into mainstream. But one of my highlights about this time era is that this was our first time that we got to have an actual arena tours. So we were playing with the big kids now, and we're trying to show them like, we deserve to be here. We ain't going anywhere. The
most shocking thing about the 2011 All the Rage tour with Blood on the Dance Floor.
So in 2011, my first tour with New Year's Day, we went out on the All the Rage tour with Blood on the Dance Floor. And there's a lot of things that we can get into with that tour and that band. One thing I want to talk about that really surprised and shocked me is that when we were removed from the tour, we came home. We were very happy to leave. We came home and decided to put out our truth and what happened and our experience of why we left the tour. Nothing more, nothing less. And it started this big giant backlash. We started getting attacked by all these kids. But the shocking part was how many kids came up to us and started to share their experiences with this band and things that happened to them. The stories I heard from some of these people, I couldn't even imagine in horror movies. And I'm not one to be shocked, because the world we live in and the way I look, it's hard to shock me. But to hear what happened to people and to see this kind of disillusioned youth, I don't want to say I almost had a loss of faith, but it was teetering onto that. But at that same time, it almost pulled you back and be like, you got to continue this fight. And one thing I'm very proud of is that we stood by our word and never had to go back and apologize because how it made other people feel based on their beliefs.
What's next for Nikki Misery and New Year's Day?
So coming up for New Year's Day, since all the tours are canceled, we've been working individually to just give some kind of entertainment to eyes, ears. We have our lead guitar player, Austin, is doing guitar run-throughs and tutorials of the band. Ashley and I are working on doing videos to actually raise up charity for animal shelters. We're trying to raise money for small businesses, especially after the fail of the PPP. We actually want to raise money and help like our friends who aren't being helped. Me personally, I just put out a clothing line called Stay Miserable. It's first showcasing a bit of me, but I kind of want to get it more to be lifestyle, something that has more meaning than just selling my face. I'm really trying to work away from that. And also along with Stay Miserable, we're doing like interactive facial filters you can do on Instagram. And with these next weeks, I'm going to be announcing a live interview show that I'm going to be doing with local artists. And what I really want to use this platform to get bands, artists, musicians, painters, tattoo artists, anything that's in the scene that kids wouldn't find on their own if they're not seeing the same like Warped Tour bands or bands featured in AP, because there's a whole world of music, of real rock and roll, of real attitude, of real rebellion that these kids could really learn from. And even that, it's just amazing music. And I would love to get that out into the world, give them a chance, especially on such a bigger platform, to be seen and heard by a lot of people. I think that'd be really cool. And I'm working with our old merch guy, his name is Johnny Cut. We've been going back and forth like the past couple days of getting like commercials, advertisements, promos. And so far we have a really cool lineup of bands. And honestly, I couldn't be more excited. But it'd be really nice if I could just go out and hug people again. Am I looking at this? Shit.
It's okay, you're good. That was actually pretty good.
That was great.
Yeah.
All right.
Nikki Misery, that's a wrap.
The Blairing Out Show.